On this episode of After Earnings, Twilio, the cloud communications platform that aims to help businesses, 400,000 of them, to communicate and understand their customers. I'm joined by CEO Khozema Shipchandler right as Twilio emerges from a multi-year turnaround. We discuss how AI is re-energizing Main Street businesses, building trust in the US telecom system in the fight against robocalls and spam, and lessons learned, sometimes painful ones, from acquisitions. Let's get into it. Thank you very much for joining. I'm really excited for this conversation, Khozema, because I'm fascinated by turnarounds generally. And turnarounds of public companies are notoriously difficult, and it's very hard to get the market to demonstrate the patience and the wherewithal to go on that journey with CEOs bold enough to start down them. So you became CEO in January 2024, and at the time, you said that Twilio was in real peril. Can you talk about what peril that was at the moment you stepped up into that seat? What was the assessment you made then, just for context here?
Yeah, I mean, I meant the word when I said it. We had three activists in the stock at the time. We were burning through a lot of cash. We were not really that profitable. Our growth had slowed down. And I think in particular, there was an acquisition that we'd done several years prior, and investors had started to ask a lot of questions about it because it was not growing. It was in and of itself burning a lot of cash. And so we just had this whole host of issues that had to be dealt with very, very quickly. And all of this was happening against the backdrop of AI. And so you've got this big technology shift that's happening at the same time while these other challenges are brewing. And we had to act fast, basically.
So describe in layman's terms your product suite as it stands today. And then we'll go through a little bit the product journey and how evolving that has been part of this turnaround. So in your own words, Twilio's super products.
Yeah, so the gist of it is that we're an infrastructure business, one that businesses use to communicate with and understand their customers. And so I think it's probably like best explained through an example. So like the PGA of America, which is the big golfing organization that sort of governs golf in this country, they started off as a messaging customer, one that would send SMS messages both towards touring pros as well as their golf pros and then fans. And now they use messaging capabilities to be sure, but they've added rich data capabilities to that as well so that they can actually personalize the kinds of engagement that they want to be able to experience with their audience. And the PGA is kind of a sports example, but it could apply to rideshare, it could apply to food service, it could apply to the largest financial institutions in the world, it could apply to healthcare companies. And so it really does run the gamut. Like fundamentally, we're trying to help our customers have a better conversation with their customers over time.
So when you stepped into the seat, and even if we take that example, there are actually now a lot of companies out there that do this sort of SMS direct-to-consumer marketing product. So you've had to evolve the suite from, I guess, things that have been more commoditized to products that are really truly differentiated. So can you talk a bit about what you've been doing through this turnaround strategy to revitalize product innovation at Twilio?
Yeah, a couple of things there. I mean, first of all, you're right that like broadly there has been a pressure for commoditization on some of these products, but we've really been able to hold up our pricing power. I mean, we've always been the market leader. We are at least 2x larger than our largest competitor, just in kind of pure play communications, if you will, meaning voice, email, SMS. And we're priced higher than the competition. We believe that we should be because our technology is fundamentally better. So that's like a pretty good place to start. In terms of some of the other richness that we've added to the conversations capabilities, like that's when that data asset that I referred to earlier that several of our investors were clamoring for us selling really comes into play. And so that data asset is a customer data platform. It's kind of known as a CDP, like that's what the analysts would refer to it as. And when you combine the data signals that we collect from that CDP with the communication signals that we're trying to send to our customers and then activate it using LLMs from AI, that's where you start to create a really rich customer engagement. And what our customers are asking for basically is can you help me create a lifetime conversation with my customers? And of course, to be able to do that, you've got to have memory, you've got to be able to have persistence, and it really does utilize those core capabilities of Twilio, i.e. communications plus data, and then using AI as a means to activate.
So can you talk about the composition of your customer base? Are we talking about larger companies, talk about whether it's small or medium-sized businesses, and the kinds of industries that are the real focal areas for your clients?
That's a tough one to pin down. We have 400,000 customers all over the world. So I would say it is a little bit more heavy in the United States than it is internationally. But the way that we think about that is where are our customers domiciled? And the reason I'm going into that technicality is the reality is all of our customers are global, right? Like they want to be able to reach their customers wherever they are in the world. And so if it's a US brand, it turns out that a lot of their customers live internationally. If it's an international brand, it turns out that a lot of their customers want to be reached in the US market. When you think about the industries, like probably the four that are the largest tend to be technology companies, financial services, healthcare, and insurance, but it really does run the gamut. And it could be a couple guys that are starting a business in a garage, like literally, like we have hundreds of thousands of those kinds of customers. They come to Twilio because we're super simple to use. We've got a great brand. We're very, very easy to develop with. But it also can include Main Street businesses. I mean, I think the one thing that's really exciting from our perspective is that with the advent of AI, Main Street businesses have actually gotten a lot of power back. And so instead of needing to distribute through other channels during off hours, like small businesses tend to be open only from like 10 to 6. That's probably even stretching it. Now they can have virtual agents that are helping them outside of working hours while the small business owner may be at home, with their spouse or kids. Instead, the business is up and running just through virtual means now. And I think that's really exciting. And then, of course, it includes, some of the largest enterprise companies in the world, too. If you were to go through the Fortune 500 list and start throwing darts, you'd probably hit, just a tremendous number of our customers there, too.
So when I think about the value proposition that you offer at Twilio, and we think about the customer experience, the customer being defined as the end consumer, one of the challenges is just all of us are being bombarded with so much corporate communication, with so many ads every single day, that actually being heard, if you're one of your clients, if you're one of these enterprises, is very difficult. So what is it specifically about your products is making sure that they're engaging their end consumer? What is it specifically? SMS, for example, folks are opting out, they're tired of spam. So where else are you going with your client base?
Yeah, that's a really astute question. So let's just use two channels because I think they really kind of make the point. One is voice. I'll come back to SMS in a second. With voice, one of the things that's happened over the last several years is that we've all been hammered with robocalls.
Yeah.
Right. So robocalls are a thing that at its worst can actually be used as a vector to commit fraud. At best, they're like a real nuisance because, folks like you and I, like we're not answering the phone anymore, right? I mean, if we don't understand what the number is, we don't trust it, and therefore we're not picking it up. And so, things like doctor's appointments, calls from your doctor's office, they're missed. Things like calls from your kid's school, like those kinds of calls are missed because, it tends to be that we don't have all of these phone numbers loaded into our phones. So a couple things that we're trying to do. One is that we're trying to help our customers brand those calls. So if it is your pharmacy, that their logo actually appears on the handset itself.
Oh, interesting.
With the name of the company. And, all of the data basically shows that if you can do that, that the propensity of a consumer to pick up goes way up. Okay, so that I think is like a sort of clever technique to be able to reinforce the trust of a channel that's relatively straightforward for us. And increasingly more and more customers are doing it, by the way, not just in voice, but also in SMS. You asked your question about SMS. You're right. Like we're also being bombarded there too. We get a lot of spam, right? And so at some point, like as a participant in the ecosystem, we want to make sure that the stuff that's going across is only things that are useful, not just stuff that we're getting spammed with. And so that actually really feeds into our strategy quite well because consumers will take more, but they'll only take more if it gets better. And that better often happens through using these data signals in combination with the communication signals that we already have to create a richer experience on the other side, right? If you're being bombarded by a brand that seemingly doesn't know you, but you've shopped at all the time, and they just keep pushing coupon after coupon after coupon, like in the old days they did with mail,
Yeah.
right? That's pretty frustrating. It's frustrating in two levels. One is that you don't want their SMS messages anymore because just they become too voluminous. But the second thing is you're like, come on, you know me, like at least address me in like some way that acknowledges that. And so I think in both regards, like there's a lot of things that we're doing to make the ecosystem better in that way, using technology. And as I mentioned, I'm in DC right now, and like one of the issues that we advocate for is how do we make the US telco network more trusted so that we reduce collectively with regulators, with other ecosystem participants to ensure that spam and robocalls are not being proliferated on these networks. And Twilio certainly is not a part of that at all, but there are other folks that are.
The element of trust is an interesting one, particularly as so much communication has migrated to other messaging systems that are, in some cases, associated with parent companies where trust remains a bit of a question for some consumers. And so one specific example I'm thinking of is WhatsApp, right? When WhatsApp opened itself up to ads, there was real sort of consternation among some areas that, this is just another extension of Meta, being able to personalize perhaps at a rate that folks weren't comfortable with or ready for yet. What are you seeing amongst your customer base in terms of their appetite for Khozema using that as a new channel to try to reach their clients?
Yeah, I mean, WhatsApp is a great channel to be able to reach your consumers. It's not that heavily used, actually. So, as you know, I'm sure, like it is ubiquitous as a peer-to-peer network, especially for folks outside the US. They use it extensively. I mean, it's free, right? So it comes with that benefit as well, in the sense that you can use it over internet networks. We do see very good uses in Brazil and Mexico specifically. I think there's more consumer acceptance of WhatsApp as a channel for businesses. Actually, in voice, it's kind of interesting, that same example that I gave you a second ago, where the branding takes place, we do brand the calls on WhatsApp in Brazil. And so the trust of that channel there is actually quite high. Now, outside of those two countries, we would love for it to take off in a much broader way. It has not, for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think predominantly SMS is also ubiquitous. It is a highly trusted channel. It allows for, I think, deeper and richer personalization issues. It doesn't tend to get bombarded with a lot of advertising. And so, we're optimistic about not just WhatsApp, but a variety of like what we call over-the-top channels that we think have great utility over time. Apple is another great one. Apple Business Messaging, I think, could be a great one. RCS could be a great one. There are these other channels that are starting to emerge, but SMS tends to be by far and away the dominant form factor.
Well, you've just had your customer conference and you spent a lot of time there talking about new products and innovation. What did you unveil there?
Yeah, the whole point of our customer conference was basically to convey to our customers that, look, you've asked us forever, how are the ways in which you can extend your quote unquote conversation with a customer over a long period of time? And can you help me, Twilio, do that? And so we actually, and not coincidentally, launched a whole conversation suite of products. And the idea was, how do you capture the memory of those interactions? So for example, if you are in a customer service interaction and that is like the third or fifth time that you've been interacting with a customer, and you're very likely to interact with them again, that you want them to be able to remember certain key aspects of that conversation so that they can be utilized later to enrich every subsequent interaction that you end up having with that organization. Could be a healthcare company, could be a retail brand.
Yeah.
And similarly, you also, ideally, before you even get on the phone, want them to remember things that are very unique to Ann Berry versus every other person that's out there in the universe. And so what we do is that we use our communications capabilities to have the back and forth, if you will. But this is where we use that data asset that I referred to earlier to actually reach inside of the data warehouse of our customers' organizations to specifically reach the Ann Berry record versus all of the others. The LLM is able to activate against that, the benefit of which is it actually dramatically reduces LLM cost as well, because now it's not scouring, the entire history of, New York or California, the two places where we live. And instead, it's going right to the relevant context that's specific to the interaction that you're having with that organization right then and there. Now, I gave customer service as an example. It could be, in the context of a promotion. It could be casual web browsing that one of us is doing. And by the way, I'm not just talking about retail experiences. I mean, I'm talking about like very, very complex interactions like purchasing a home, which requires a mortgage and requires documentation and probably requires you to engage with the partner that you're utilizing to provide those products and services, not just over a phone call, not just over a text message, not just over email, but all of those different things at the same time, or perhaps even on your own time in an asynchronous fashion. Of course, we're also anticipating like the next generation of folks, like people like my kids who are 20 and 18, who couldn't be bothered to get on the phone and like have a synchronous conversation and want to be able to do everything asynchronously. But the point is that it's simple transactions where you want folks to remember you so that they can create more delightful experiences over time, to very, very complex ones where they can engage you in the ways in which you want to be engaged at the time during which you want to be engaged across every channel, either at the same time or across channels in such a way that they constantly know exactly who you are. You're never having to restate information. And that sequence of communications is totally seamless, which is really, really exciting. And so we launched this whole suite of products during our customer conference. We made them all generally available, which was really exciting for us, because what that really means is, you can wow customers on stage. Like that's one thing, okay? But then when you leave the stage, where the magic happens is a customer's ability to talk to their sales rep in the hallway and say, wow, that was really cool. Can I actually buy that? And the sales rep says, yeah, let's talk about it right now. We can get you up and running today, right? So I think that's really, really exciting for us. And there's some other things that we did in terms of just making our console experience easier. And then I think the one other area, you talked about trust earlier in the conversation, is identity. So we kind of teased some stuff that we're working on in identity. We do think identity going forward is going to be foundational, especially as it relates to agent to human, human to agent interactions. And we're going to be launching some products later this year that, since we had a captive audience, we wanted to take the opportunity to tease just a little bit.
Before we leave product and talk about some other aspects of the business and its performance, I just want to push again on this complex example that you've provided. Medical appointments I get because medical records is one thing. Retail I also get because I'm already seeing evidence that retailers are pretty sophisticated when it comes to looking at my purchase history or my returns history, or even, what I browsed on their website. But where I'd like to get more clarity is on the mortgage example, right? What do you mean by a more personalized set of references to an interaction I've had with, for example, a mortgage broker? If I provide my documents, if I call and ask questions, what is an example of, in that instance, Twilio being used for that mortgage broker client of yours to show to me proactively that they are personalizing my interaction in a seamless way?
Yeah, great question. So, think about it this way, right? Most home shopping starts on, one of the branded websites,
Yeah.
right? So Zillow or Redfin or Realtor.com. Most of these guys are integrated on the back end with, different kinds of mortgage capabilities as well. So what starts off as an origination on a website, right? What those companies want fundamentally is not just for you to browse a home and be able to sell advertising on those websites, but to actually be able to convert that into a home purchase, right? So what initially happens is that there's data that each of these companies is able to collect about what it is that you're actually browsing, what kinds of homes that you're looking at. in some cases you may have an agent, in other cases you may not. And so the first point of contact is that how can they give you a more specific offering that is very catered to, I don't know, let's say you're looking for 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms within a certain price range, within a certain neighborhood. Like, they can easily tailor that experience, as you know. So next step of that transaction is, okay, great. Like, there's a set of houses that are out there. What's actually available? I want to go book an appointment to go see one of those houses. To be able to transact that entire history, you're going to need voice, email, and texting capabilities, like where they refer to it or not this way. The operating system of real estate is basically all of these different kinds of communications channels. It's probably text, frankly, more than any other. But that's how you tend to communicate with your agent as well as with these companies. Okay, so then you go and look at the home, you find the one that you want. Now it comes time to actually complete the purchase, right? So what that origination engine is going to do, they're going to put you in touch with the mortgage broker, as you pointed out, but it's a full experience, right? So they already have a bunch of information about you that they don't need to collect again. But what they do need to do is actually verify things like your ability to pay. And, they've actually got to get you to complete a bunch of documents. They need to make sure that, if there's a rate that you're actually shopping for or a particular loan structure, that you're able to avail yourself of all that. So a lot of that is actually going to happen over the phone. Now, increasingly, a lot of it is actually happening through AI agents, okay, which I think is really, really interesting. And we're seeing this fielded by a number of our customers, and that actually does require both our voice stack as well as that data element that I described earlier, plus whatever LLMs our customers have chosen. Now, let's say for whatever reason you want to flip that conversation over to a human agent. You want that to be done seamlessly, right? So you don't want to be able to have to repeat all the same information all over again. You don't want to have to be re-authenticated all over again. Like, that's frustrating. So what happens in these interactions is that the virtual agent flips it over seamlessly to the human agent. The human agent, after collecting information, which is now being stored in that data record about you, they then want to actually complete the transaction. But to complete the transaction, they've got to send you a notification, typically through email or voice, or excuse me, email or text, because you've got to sign documents, right? Like, to actually be able to complete mortgage paperwork, you've got to sign documents, you've got to provide, proof of your financials, you likely have to be able to upload certain things. You can't necessarily do all of this at the same time,
Right.
and so you want to do some of these things piecemeal. And so you can now avail yourself of all of these different channels on your time through the entirety of the experience, from origination through to mortgage exploration, through to mortgage closure, to document completion, to the day that you move in your home. And let's just take it one step further, okay? The reality is, Anne, like, where these companies want to ideally capture you in the context of that lifetime conversation is they want to first get a customer when they're out of college and renting their first apartment. What they understand is that most customers have a variety of life events that they're going to experience through the entirety of their life cycle. And so what starts off as an apartment on one of these origination engines ends up being a starter home. And a starter home, once a couple has a family, let's say, ends up becoming, a home that you can fit kids into. And, depending on the size of the family, maybe that becomes a larger home over time. And maybe that becomes a downsize once those kids move out. I mean, you get the point, right? So the point being that, again, using channels and using data, companies now have the opportunity to create these literally lifetime experiences with their customers, and their ability to personalize, like, that's what creates the intimacy that ensures that these brands get used over and over again.
Let's wrap by talking about how this translates into the financial performance. You posted your Q1 results, which was one of your strongest quarters in history, with 20% year-over-year revenue growth. Just really quickly, Khozema, can you just give us a sense for what was the single biggest driver of that strong growth number?
I mean, look, we've done a lot of investing in terms of, how do we help ourselves in terms of some of these growth channels. I think the two ends of the continuum that I would point to, one is self-serve, so this is customers that will likely never be touched by one of our sales reps. We've done a lot inside of our console to make it super simple, super easy for one of our customers to onboard themselves, activate against our products, use multiple of our APIs, use multiple channels, use data, what have you. Very, very simple, straightforward experience. And in Q1, we actually, in the history of the company, had the highest level of customer growth ever, which is pretty exciting. And some of these customers will turn out to be some of the largest enterprises ever. Many of them will just stay, small and medium-sized businesses forever. Both are great because they are going to remain, vital parts of our platform. So that is one end that was very exciting. The other is with ISVs. These are folks who come in all shapes and sizes. It's a very, very long tail for us. Could be AI companies, could be marketing technology companies. We've seen great growth there as well. There again, there's been a lot of technology investments that we've made to make it easier for our customers in that cohort to be able to utilize our products, to be able to grow with our products. Again, for their engineers to be able to plug in without a lot of lift from Twilio. And so I think we've always kind of been the easy button of communications, increasingly the easy button of communications plus data and AI, and our ability to create these awesome conversations between our customers and their consumers. Like, we're unparalleled in that way, and I think that's what we're really finding, and you saw that in our Q1 results.
And last question for you. You've had more than $130 million of free cash flow, strong free cash flow generation and conversion throughout the year. What are you planning to do with that cash?
Well, I think we've been very judicious buyers of our own stock, and I think we still believe that it's a great buy, and we have a large authorization left in terms of stock buybacks. So I think we'll continue a pace there. We use a grid as a means to do that. And then, of course, we are looking, we maintain an active game board. We've been very transparent with investors about that. I wouldn't say that the money is burning a hole in our pocket. But we did do a small acquisition towards the end of last year. And, if something comes along at the right kind of price and product combination, then we'd certainly take a look.
Great to have you on. Lots going on. Please come back. We'd love to get the update. Thanks for joining. I'm Anne Berry. Thank you for tuning into After Earnings, the show that brings you up close and personal with the executives behind the world's most interesting publicly traded companies. If you learned something today, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Upcoming episodes will feature CEOs and CFOs from Match Group, Shift4 Prudential, and many more. We'll see you next time.